Over the past several months, I've had the opportunity to become up close and personal with those in my community who need a little extra help. And I've understood through this experience what the face of need looks like. And through this experience, I've seen that need looks like my family, need looks like my grandparents, need looks like my brother, need looks like my friend, but mostly need looks like my neighbor. The reality in my community is that there are plenty of resources. There is medical care, there is care for food, there is care for clothing, there are meals provided, there is domestic violence assistance, there is rent payment and utility payments. But the one thing that is lacking in the community where I live is shelter. The reality is that homelessness is an issue, and the other reality is that our city council is refusing to identify the issue. There is a large homeless population, and there is no permanent shelter in place in the city in which I live. The population in Denton County, where I reside, of homeless residents in 2014 was 201 single individuals. There were 27 families with children and 16 people listed as other residents. This was through the Homeless Coalition survey that's done every year, and it takes a glimpse into the homeless population. 50% of these individuals had some type of shelter, meaning they lived with someone else, they were in a shelter in a different city but still a resident of our community, or they relied on a pattern of moving from place to place, not in a permanent situation, but just as a way to live. 15% of the individuals surveyed were living in a place not meant for habitation, meaning car, outside, and places like that. So it made me wonder, does shelter make a difference? Does it matter if someone has a permanent place to stay or not? Of course, the issue may never be resolved, but anytime someone is not living in their car, not living outside, not dragging their kids from house to house in an attempt to keep them safe or keep them warm, it means less people on the streets, it means less harm that could come from sleeping in your vehicle, and it means less you're spending on resources in order to travel to the next city where there may be a shelter available. There is a lack of permanent shelter, and according to city council minutes from July 2013, the city in which I live had funds in order to contribute to the domestic violence shelter, which is about 20 miles away. The city council supported the Salvation Army's lunch program every day since 2010, and they also funded a local church's drop-in for homeless youth who were at risk, but they did not want to put into place a permanent shelter for adults and or families. And there is no indication that there are any plans for an adult shelter in the future. In my consultation with Rebecca Gibson, who is the manager at the local Salvation Army, the city has failed in their efforts to acknowledge that there is a homeless issue. Even though they see the numbers and they understand that they exist, they don't see it as a real issue. And they have not worked to build a relationship with nonprofits in order to address this issue. Through my personal volunteer work and looking at this nonprofit and how they handle homelessness, it has become clear that there needs to be a solution in order to impact the lives of these people. Homelessness is an issue that may always be an issue. There are organizations and there are movements that will say that we can put an end to homelessness, but the reality is, with the prevalence of mental illness, with the issues of not having enough, with the issues of some people do not want to be in permanent housing. They want a place to sleep that's not outside, but they do not want to live in a home as we know home. So this issue may never be resolved, but there are resources that we can offer people that would be a much better alternative to being outside sleeping, in your car sleeping, or other solutions that people find that are short term and not helpful. What I've learned from this experience is that homelessness and need is not bound to one particular group. I have learned that I have been judgmental, I have been stereotyping, and the face of need and the face of homelessness does not fit one criteria. And it's not always because someone made bad choices or they are addicted to something. That is not always the case. Sometimes it's just something that happens over time. No one wakes up one day and says, I'd really like to be homeless today. It's something that happens. It's a process and it's a journey. And everyone who's in this journey that I have interacted with treats it differently. From the woman who lives in her car with her son to the guy who lives in a tent out in the woods, everyone has arrived at that place differently and has a different perspective. And some people are content that way, but they also desire a place where they can be warm, where they can be fed, where they can feel safe, even though this is the life that maybe has happened to them as a result of their life circumstances. What I would do differently is I would look at each person who is in need, especially the homeless, and approach them with grace and approach them with kindness and approach them with an open mind. And rather than trying to fix their problem, I would be the best I can be at offering them resources and meeting them where they are and helping them along their journey, but understanding that their choices are not my choices and their life is not my life. And what they experience in their living situation is not what I would choose or where I hope I won't end up, but where they are needs to be respected, and who they are as people also needs to be respected.